Waitress got fired for feeding a homeless man, unaware. He was the Millionaire CEO in disguise. The morning rush at Willow's Diner was always chaotic. The sizzling sound of frying pans, the aroma of fresh coffee, and the chatter of early customers filled the air. Among the busy staff was Clara, a kind-hearted waitress known for her warm smile and gentle nature. She wasn't the fastest or the most experienced, but every customer she served left feeling valued, and that made her special. Clara worked double shifts most days, trying to save enough to support her ailing mother and pay her younger brother's school fees. Life wasn't easy, but she never complained. She believed kindness always came back around, even when the world seemed unfair. That afternoon, the diner's door creaked open, and in walked a disheveled man, clothes torn, beard unkempt, and eyes tired from sleepless nights. He quietly took a seat in the corner, drawing judgmental stares from other customers. The manager, Mr. Brooks, frowned immediately. "Clara, get him out of here. We don't need his kind scaring off paying customers," he ordered sharply. But Clara hesitated. Something in the man's eyes stopped her, a look of exhaustion and quiet dignity. She approached him softly and asked, "Have you eaten today?" He shook his head. Without a second thought, she brought him a plate of warm soup, bread, and a cup of coffee, paying for it out of her own tips. When her manager saw it, he stormed over, his voice echoing across the diner. "Are you crazy? I told you to kick him out, not feed him." Clara tried to explain, "Sir, he's hungry, and it's just one meal." "That's it. You're fired," he barked, grabbing her apron and pulling it off. "Take your charity work somewhere else." Tears welled up in her eyes as she quietly gathered her things and walked out. The homeless man stood, stunned. Before she could leave, he whispered, "Thank you for seeing me." She smiled faintly. "Everyone deserves kindness," she said, before disappearing through the door. Before we continue with this story, I want you to comment where you are watching from and what time is it. And if you are new here, please subscribe and hit that notification button. Adrian Cole had built his fortune from absolutely nothing. At 42 years old, he was worth over $300 million. The founder and CEO of Cole Hospitality Group, a company that owned 17 upscale restaurants, 6 boutique hotels, and a chain of artisanal coffee shops across the Pacific Northwest. But wealth, Adrian had discovered over the years, came with a profound isolation that no amount of money could fix. People treated him differently once they knew who he was. Suddenly, everyone had brilliant ideas they wanted funded, charities that desperately needed his support, business ventures that just required his investment to become wildly successful. Employees smiled nervously in his presence, telling him what they thought he wanted to hear rather than the truth. Dates became performances where women competed to seem impressive rather than genuine. So 6 months ago, Adrian had started an experiment. Once a week, he'd disguise himself wearing his oldest, most worn clothes, skipping his usual grooming, making himself look like someone society had forgotten, and visit one of his establishments, not to test employees in some cruel gotcha game, but to understand the experience of people who existed on society's margins, to see how his staff treated those with no power, no money, no ability to complain to management or leave bad reviews. What he'd witnessed had been mixed. Some employees maintained professional courtesy regardless of how guests appeared. Others revealed casual cruelty, dismissiveness, the kind of dehumanization that happened when people felt certain someone couldn't affect their livelihood. Today, Adrian had chosen Willow's Diner, a property his company had acquired 6 months ago as part of a package deal. He'd never visited it personally, had mostly left the existing management in place since the financials looked solid. But he'd heard rumors about the manager, Mr. Brooks, nothing specific enough to warrant action, just vague mentions that staff turnover was unusually high, that the work environment could be challenging. So Adrian had walked in looking deliberately destitute, clothes genuinely torn from a thrift store, face unwashed, beard grown out over the past week, specifically for this purpose. He'd taken a seat in the corner booth, positioned where he could observe the entire dining room, and waited to see how long it took before someone asked him to leave. The judgmental stares had started immediately. Other customers glancing at him with disgust or pity, parents pulling children closer, one couple requesting to be moved to a different section. Adrian had watched it all with the detachment of someone conducting research, mentally noting each interaction. Then he'd seen Mr. Brooks approach a young waitress, Clara, according to her name tag, speaking in low, urgent tones, but with body language that screamed authority and threat. Adrian couldn't hear the specific words, but the meaning was clear. Get rid of the homeless man. But Clara had surprised him. Instead of approaching with thinly veiled hostility or apologetic requests that he leave, she'd walked over with genuine concern in her eyes. "Have you eaten today?" she'd asked, her voice gentle, treating him like a human being worthy of care rather than a problem to be removed. When Adrian had shaken his head honestly, he'd skipped breakfast specifically to make his hunger look more authentic. Clara had made a decision that clearly went against her manager's orders. She'd brought him soup, bread, coffee, real food, not scraps, served with dignity, not condescension. Adrian had eaten slowly, watching Clara work the rest of her shift. He'd noticed how she treated every customer with that same warmth. The elderly couple who needed extra time deciding their order, the harried mother with 2 young children making a mess, the businessman who barely looked up from his phone while ordering. Clara gave everyone the same patient, genuine service. Then Mr. Brooks had noticed what Clara had done. Adrian had watched the manager storm across the dining room, his face red with rage, completely disproportionate to the situation. The entire diner had fallen silent as Brooks berated Clara for feeding a homeless man, for wasting food that she'd paid for herself, Adrian learned later, for defying his direct order. "You're fired!" Brooks had shouted, loud enough for everyone to hear, pulling Clara's apron off with unnecessary force. The humiliation was clearly deliberate, not just terminating her employment, but doing it publicly, making an example of her for the rest of the staff. Adrian had felt rage building in his chest, not the hot, explosive kind, but cold and calculated. This manager, working for Adrian's company, representing Adrian's brand, was firing an employee for showing basic human compassion, was creating an environment where kindness was punishable, where treating people with dignity got you terminated. As Clara had walked toward the exit, tears streaming down her face but maintaining her composure with impressive strength, Adrian had stood. He'd whispered his thanks, unable to reveal himself yet but wanting her to know the gesture had mattered. "Everyone deserves kindness," Clara had replied, her voice steady despite the tears. Then she'd left, and Adrian had sat back down, his mind already working through what would happen next. He'd stayed at the diner for another hour, observing. He'd watched Mr. Brooks bask in the petty power of having fired someone in front of an audience. Watched other staff members grow more nervous and subservient, clearly afraid of being next. Watched customers who'd witnessed the scene either look uncomfortable or nod approvingly at Brooks's decisive action. The diner's culture was toxic, Adrian realized. Brooks had created an environment where employees felt constantly threatened, where showing compassion was dangerous, where the values that actually mattered, human decency, genuine service, treating people well regardless of their ability to pay, were actively discouraged. This needed to be fixed, immediately. After leaving the diner, Adrian had made several phone calls, first to his head of HR, requesting a full file on Mr. Brooks and every employment action he'd taken in the 6 months since Adrian's company had acquired Willow's Diner. Second to his legal team, ensuring everything he planned to do would be properly documented and defensible. Third, to his director of operations, explaining that there would be significant management changes at the diner, effective immediately. Then Adrian had gone home, showered, shaved, put on one of his usual expensive suits, and prepared for tomorrow morning's visit to Willow's Diner. This time, everyone would know exactly who he was. That evening, Adrian found himself thinking about Clara more than perhaps was professionally appropriate. There'd been something about her, not just the kindness she'd shown him, though that was significant, but the way she'd maintained dignity even while being humiliated, the way she'd treated every customer with genuine warmth rather than fake cheerfulness. The strength it must have taken to work double shifts for family she was supporting, to show kindness when life was clearly difficult for her. Adrian pulled up the employee records his HR director had sent over. Clara Martinez, 26 years old, had been working at Willow's Diner for 2 years. Impeccable attendance record, no customer complaints, several positive comments in the suggestion box, specifically mentioning her excellent service. Her personnel file included a note from 6 months ago when Brooks had taken over as manager. Needs to be faster. Too much time spent talking to customers. Warns needed about efficiency. Adrian felt his jaw clench reading that. Clara's "too much time talking to customers" was exactly the kind of genuine connection that created loyal patrons. Her warmth was an asset, not a weakness. But Brooks had seen it as something to correct, to discourage, to eventually punish. The HR file on Brooks was equally revealing. In 6 months, he'd terminated 4 employees, an unusually high number for a diner of Willow's size. 2 had been fired for insubordination, questioning Brooks's decisions, 1 for theft, eating food that was about to be thrown away, and now Clara for violating company policy regarding when free food could be provided. Except Adrian's company had no such policy. In fact, corporate guidelines explicitly encouraged feeding people experiencing food insecurity when possible as part of their community engagement mission. Brooks had apparently invented a policy to justify his cruelty. Adrian spent several hours that evening drafting plans for Willow's Diner's transformation, not just firing Brooks that was obvious and necessary, but completely restructuring how the diner operated, what values it embodied, how it served both paying customers and the community's most vulnerable members. And at the center of those plans was Clara. If she was willing to return, and Adrian understood she might not be after such humiliation, he wanted to offer her a role that recognized her capabilities and values. Not just her old waitressing position, but something that allowed her natural compassion and genuine service skills to shine. The next morning, Adrian arrived at Willow's Diner at exactly 9 o'clock in a sleek black car that made heads turn on the street. His assistant Patricia accompanied him, along with his director of operations and head of security, not because he expected trouble, but because this needed to look official and serious. The morning shift was in full swing when Adrian walked through the door. The hostess did a double take, clearly recognizing him from photos, even if they'd never met in person. Mr. Cole," she stammered. "We weren't expecting, no one told us you'd be." "That's fine," Adrian said calmly. "Where's Mr. Brooks?" "In his office, sir." "Should I? I'll find him myself." Adrian walked through the dining room, very aware of how every conversation stopped, how staff and customers alike stared at the obviously wealthy, clearly important man moving through the space. He found Brooks in the small manager's office behind the kitchen, reviewing inventory sheets. Brooks looked up, and Adrian watched the exact moment recognition and fear hit simultaneously. Mr. Cole," Brooks said, standing quickly and knocking papers off his desk in his haste. "Sir, I didn't know you were coming. If I'd known, I would have prepared." "Prepared what, exactly?" Adrian asked, his voice pleasant but with steel underneath. "A performance? Would you have acted differently if you knew I was watching?" "I don't understand, sir. Yesterday afternoon I was here," Adrian said, "in disguise. I wanted to see how this establishment operated when no one thought the owner was present. And what I saw was deeply troubling, Mr. Brooks." Brooks's face cycled through confusion, realization, and dawning horror as he understood. The homeless man? That was you?" "That was me," Adrian confirmed. "And I watched you fire one of your best employees for showing basic human compassion, for feeding someone who was hungry, for treating a fellow human being with dignity." "Sir, I can explain. It's about maintaining standards, about not encouraging loitering, about safety concerns." Adrian held up a hand, cutting him off. "Mr. Brooks, you're terminated, effective immediately. HR will be in touch about your final paycheck and exit paperwork. Security will escort you from the premises now." "You can't, I have a contract. I'll sue for wrongful termination." "You're welcome to try," Adrian said calmly. But you fired an employee for violating a company policy that doesn't exist. You've created a hostile work environment that's driven away 4 employees in 6 months, and you've operated this establishment in direct contradiction to the values my company was founded on. Our legal team is confident we'll prevail in any lawsuit you file. Security stepped forward, and Brooks seemed to realize that arguing was pointless. He was escorted out within minutes, still sputtering about unfairness and his rights. After Brooks was gone, Adrian gathered the remaining staff in the dining room. He saw fear on most faces if the manager could be fired so suddenly. What did that mean for them? But he also saw relief, particularly on the faces of the long-time employees who'd clearly suffered under Brooks's management. "I'm Adrian Cole," he said unnecessarily. They all knew who he was by now. "I own this diner along with several other properties in the area. Yesterday, I came here in disguise because I'd heard concerning things about the work environment under Mr. Brooks. What I witnessed confirmed those concerns." He paused, making eye contact with various staff members. "Clara Martinez was fired yesterday for feeding a hungry person. That action contradicts everything my company stands for. We believe in community service, in treating everyone with dignity, in recognizing that genuine compassion is an asset, not a weakness. Clara embodied those values, and she was punished for it. If any of you have experienced similar treatment, if you've been discouraged from showing kindness, if you've been threatened for questioning unfair policies, if you've watched good people be driven away, I want to hear about it. My HR director will be conducting confidential interviews with anyone who wants to share their experience." Bye. He could see several staff members nodding, clearly having stories they wanted to tell. Moving forward, this diner will operate differently. We'll be implementing a community meals program, providing food to anyone experiencing food insecurity. We'll be revising policies to ensure staff feel safe showing compassion, and we'll be creating a workplace where your values and humanity are recognized as strengths, not liabilities. Quote, one server, a middle-aged woman named Diane, raised her hand tentatively. "Mr. Cole, is Clara coming back?" "I hope so," Adrian said honestly. "I'm going to personally offer her that opportunity, but after being humiliated and fired unjustly, she may not want to return. That will be entirely her decision." After the meeting, Adrian asked his assistant Patricia to find Clara's contact information and current address. "I want to visit her personally," he said, "not send an impersonal letter or phone call. She deserves a face-to-face apology and job offer." "Sir, is that appropriate?" Patricia asked carefully. Given that she was recently terminated, there could be concerns about power dynamics or pressure. "Which is why you're coming with me," Adrian said. "I want this to be completely above board and respectful of her autonomy. She needs to know she can refuse without any negative consequences." They found Clara's address, a modest apartment building in a working-class neighborhood, about 15 minutes from the diner. Adrian left the company car parked nearby and walked to her unit with Patricia, very aware that his expensive suit probably looked absurdly out of place in this building. Clara answered the door after the second knock, still in pajamas at 10 in the morning, her eyes red from crying. She looked confused seeing Adrian and Patricia standing there. "Can I help you?" she asked, clearly not recognizing Adrian from yesterday's disguise. "Miss Martinez, my name is Adrian Cole. I own the hospitality group that includes Willow's Diner. May we come in? I have something important to discuss with you." Clara's face went through several emotions, confusion, recognition as she placed his name, worry about why her former employer's boss was at her door. Okay, but my apartment is small and messy. I wasn't expecting." "That's perfectly fine," Adrian assured her. "We won't take much of your time." Clara's apartment was indeed small, a studio with a kitchenette, a couch that probably converted to a bed, and not much else. But it was clean despite her apology about mess and personal touches, photos on the wall, books stacked carefully. A small herb garden on the windowsill spoke to someone making the best of limited space and resources. "Miss Martinez, may I call you Clara?" Adrian waited for her nod before continuing. "I want to explain what happened yesterday. The homeless man you fed? That was me." Clara's eyes widened. That was, you were testing us? Setting a trap? Not a trap, Adrian said firmly, and not exactly a test. I'd heard concerning things about Mr. Brooks's management style, so I visited in disguise to see how the diner operated when no one thought ownership was watching. Clara, what I witnessed was you showing extraordinary compassion in difficult circumstances. You treated someone you believed to be homeless with genuine kindness. You paid for food out of your own tips. You maintained your dignity even while being unjustly fired. Tears were forming in Clara's eyes again. I lost my job for doing the right thing. Mr. Brooks said I violated policy, that I was causing safety issues, and Mr. Brooks was lying, Adrian interrupted gently. Our company has no policy against feeding people experiencing food insecurity. In fact, our corporate values explicitly encourage community support. Brooks invented a policy to justify cruelty, and as of this morning, he no longer works for my company. Clara stared at him. You fired him? Immediately, Adrian confirmed. He created a toxic work environment, terminated multiple employees unjustly, and operated in complete contradiction to our company values. Clara, I'm here to offer you your job back, but not just your old position. I want to offer you a role as Community Outreach Coordinator for Willow's Diner. You develop and run programs feeding people experiencing food insecurity, coordinate with local charities, ensure the diner serves everyone in the community with dignity and compassion. Why? Clara whispered. Why would you do this for me? Because yesterday you showed me that genuine kindness still exists, that some people will choose to do the right thing even when it costs them personally. That's rare, Clara. That's valuable. And that's exactly what I want, driving my company's community engagement. Clara was crying openly now. I don't understand. Yesterday I was fired and humiliated. Today you're offering me a promotion? This doesn't make sense. It makes perfect sense, Adrian said. You were punished for embodying the values that matter. Now you're being rewarded for those same values. Clara, I'm not offering this out of pity or guilt. I'm offering it because you're exactly the kind of person I want representing my company, but you're under no obligation to accept. After what happened yesterday, I'd completely understand if you want nothing to do with Willow's Diner or my company. Clara looked around her small apartment, then at the photos on the wall. An elderly woman, Adrian assumed, was her mother, a teenage boy who must be her younger brother. She was clearly thinking about what this opportunity meant, not just for her, but for her family. Can I have some time to think about it? She asked. Of course. Take as long as you need. My assistant Patricia will give you our contact information. Call when you've made your decision, or if you have any questions about the position, salary, benefits, anything at all. As Adrian and Patricia prepared to leave, Clara asked one more question. Mr. Cole, can I ask you something personal? Adrian nodded. Why were you testing your businesses in disguise? You're wealthy and successful. Why do you care how homeless people get treated? Adrian considered his answer carefully. Because how a business treats people with no power, no money, no ability to affect their success, that reveals the business's true character. Anyone can be kind to someone who might leave a positive review or become a loyal, high-paying customer. But showing compassion to someone who can never benefit you? That's genuine humanity. And that's what I want my companies to embody, especially when I'm not watching. Clara nodded slowly, seeming to understand something important in that explanation. After leaving Clara's apartment, Adrian found himself hoping she'd accept his offer. Not just because she'd be good at the job, though he was certain she would be, but because something about her had affected him in ways he didn't quite want to examine yet. Her kindness had reminded him why he'd built his company in the first place. Not to accumulate wealth, but to create something meaningful, to employ good people doing good work, to have positive impact on communities. That evening, Adrian received a call from an unknown number. Mr. Cole, this is Clara Martinez. I've thought about your offer, and I'd like to accept the Community Outreach Coordinator position. When would you want me to start? Adrian smiled. How about Monday? That gives you the weekend to prepare and gives me time to set up your office and get paperwork ready. Monday works, Clara agreed. Mr. Cole, thank you for seeing me, for defending me, for turning something awful into an opportunity. I won't let you down. Clara, you've already proven your character. I have no doubts about you. I'll see you Monday morning. As Adrian ended the call, he realized this was the beginning of something significant. Clara Martinez had walked into his life disguised as just another waitress at just another diner, but her simple act of feeding someone she thought was homeless had revealed her as someone extraordinary. Someone whose values aligned perfectly with what Adrian had been searching for: genuine humanity, authentic compassion, the kind of character that couldn't be faked or performed. What Adrian didn't know yet, what neither of them knew, was that the professional relationship starting Monday would eventually become something far more personal. That the woman he'd met while disguised as homeless would become someone he couldn't imagine his life without. That sometimes the most meaningful connections begin in the most unexpected circumstances, when people reveal their true selves without realizing anyone important is watching. For now, Adrian was just grateful he'd witnessed Clara's kindness, grateful he'd been able to correct an injustice, grateful that tomorrow Willow's Diner would begin operating according to the values that actually mattered. And somewhere across town, Clara was looking at her mother and brother, telling them that she'd gotten a better job, that things were going to be okay, that somehow kindness really had come back around just like she'd always believed it would. Clara's first day as community outreach coordinator began at 8 o'clock on a Monday morning that felt surreal in its promise. She dressed carefully, not too formal but professional enough to signal she took this role seriously, and arrived at Willow's Diner 30 minutes early, because showing up on time felt somehow insufficient for such an important occasion. The diner looked different already. In just 3 days since Brooks's termination, visible changes had appeared. A large chalkboard near the entrance now read, "Everyone welcome, community meals available daily 1 a.m. 2 p.m. The staff break room that Clara glimpsed through the kitchen had been renovated, new furniture, a coffee station, even some potted plants that made the space feel less institutional. Adrian was waiting for her in what had been Brooks's office, but was now hers, a small but nicely appointed space with a desk, comfortable chair, and a window overlooking the street. He stood when she entered, offering a warm smile. "Clara, welcome. How are you feeling?" "Nervous," Clara admitted honestly. "Grateful, a little overwhelmed. This is such a big change from waitressing." "You'll be excellent at this," Adrian assured her. "Your instinct for treating people with dignity, your understanding of what it's like to struggle financially, your natural compassion, those are exactly the skills this role requires. The administrative aspects you can learn, the values you already have." They spent the morning reviewing Clara's responsibilities. She'd coordinate with local homeless shelters and food banks to identify people experiencing food insecurity. She'd develop menus for the community meals program that were nutritious but cost-effective. She'd train staff on how to serve everyone with dignity regardless of their ability to pay. She'd manage a budget Adrian had allocated specifically for community outreach. "I want to be clear about something," Adrian said as they finished reviewing the position details. "This isn't just a feel-good program we're running to look charitable. I genuinely believe businesses have responsibility to their communities beyond generating profit. Willow's Diner sits in a neighborhood with significant food insecurity. We have the resources to help, therefore we should help. It's that straightforward." "Not many business owners think that way," Clara observed. "More should," Adrian said simply. "I grew up poor, Clara. My family relied on food banks and free lunch programs to survive. I remember what it felt like to be hungry, to be judged for needing help, to feel ashamed asking for assistance. Building wealth didn't erase those memories. It just gave me resources to ensure other people don't have to experience that same shame." Clara felt something shift in her perception of Adrian. He wasn't just wealthy, he'd earned his wealth from nothing, remembered where he'd come from, used his success to help others, rather than distance himself from people still struggling. That was rare. That was special. If you've ever been given a second chance after being treated unfairly, if you've ever had someone see your potential when others only saw your limitations, drop a comment and subscribe. This story shows us that sometimes losing one opportunity opens doors to something far better, that standing firm in your values, even when it costs you, can lead to rewards you never imagined. Over the following weeks, Clara threw herself into the community outreach role with dedication that impressed everyone at the diner. She partnered with 3 local homeless shelters, creating a system where their clients could receive vouchers for free meals at Willow's. She developed relationships with food banks, arranging for surplus food to be distributed through the diner rather than wasted. She trained staff on trauma-informed service, teaching them how to treat people experiencing homelessness with dignity rather than pity or judgment. The Community Meals program launched 2 weeks after Clara started. Every day from 11 to 2, anyone could come to Willow's diner and receive a free, nutritious meal, no questions asked, no vouchers required, no means testing, just food, served with the same care and respect as any paying customer received. The impact was immediate and profound. People who'd been eating at shelters or going hungry discovered a place that welcomed them without judgment. Families struggling financially found reliable access to at least one good meal daily. Elderly people on fixed incomes who'd been skipping meals to afford medication could eat without depleting their limited resources. But what moved Clara most was how the program transformed the diner's culture. Staff who'd been wary, initially concerned about safety or worried that those people would drive away paying customers, discovered that treating everyone with dignity actually created a warmer, more welcoming environment. Regular paying customers appreciated knowing their patronage supported community meals. Several became donors, contributing money specifically to expand the program. Adrian visited the diner frequently during this transition, officially to oversee operations, but Clara suspected also to check on her and see the program's progress. They fell into a pattern of having lunch together once or twice a week, ostensibly discussing the community outreach work, but increasingly ranging into more personal territory. "You've exceeded every expectation I had," Adrian told her during one of these lunches, about 6 weeks after she'd started. "The Community Meals program is serving over 100 people daily. Staff morale has improved dramatically. Even our revenue is up because regular customers appreciate what we're doing." "It feels good," Clara admitted, "making a real difference instead of just serving food for tips. Don't get me wrong, I loved waitressing, loved connecting with customers, but this work has meaning beyond the immediate transaction." "That's because you understand that dignity matters as much as nutrition," Adrian said. "A free meal served with judgment or pity doesn't actually help people, but food provided with genuine respect and welcome that nourishes more than just the body." Clara found herself looking forward to these lunches with Adrian more than was probably professionally appropriate. He was thoughtful, genuinely interested in her perspective, willing to admit when he didn't know something, rather than performing false expertise. Their conversations ranged from the practical details of running community programs to deeper discussions about wealth inequality, social responsibility, what made life meaningful. "Can I ask you something personal?" Clara ventured during one lunch. "You don't have to answer if it's too intrusive." "Ask," Adrian encouraged. "Why aren't you married? You're successful, kind, attractive. I'd think you'd have people lining up." Adrian laughed, though it sounded slightly bitter. "People line up for my money, not for me. Every woman I've dated seriously has eventually revealed she was more interested in my wealth than my actual personality. One even sold private details of our relationship to a tabloid for 6 figures. After that, I stopped trying." "That's awful," Clara said sincerely, "to never know if people care about you for yourself." "It's why I do the disguise thing," Adrian admitted. "When I dress as a homeless person, people reveal their true character. There's no pretending to be nice because they think I might benefit them. You either have compassion or you don't." "And I passed your test," Clara said, though without bitterness. "It wasn't a test," Adrian insisted. "Not for you specifically. I had no idea who you were when I walked into the diner that day. But yes, you demonstrated extraordinary character. You saw someone hungry and fed them, even when it cost you personally. That matters, Clara. That reveals who you truly are." Their relationship remained professional, but with undercurrents of something more attraction neither was quite ready to acknowledge, growing friendship that felt significant beyond just employer and employee. Clara told herself it was just gratitude she felt, appreciation for Adrian's defense of her and the opportunity he'd provided. But she couldn't quite ignore how her heart sped up when he walked into the diner, how she found herself dressing more carefully on days she knew they'd have lunch together. 3 months into Clara's new role, her mother's health took a serious turn. The heart condition that had been manageable became acute, requiring hospitalization and extensive testing to determine whether surgery would be necessary. Clara was terrified not just about potentially losing her mother, but about the financial implications. Even with the better health insurance her new position provided, serious medical care meant deductibles, co-pays, costs that could devastate her carefully balanced budget. She tried to hide her stress at work, maintaining professional composure even as anxiety gnawed at her constantly. But Adrian noticed he always seemed to notice when something was wrong. "Clara, you seem distracted lately," he observed during one of their lunches. "Is everything okay?" "It's fine," Clara said automatically, then reconsidered. Adrian had been nothing but supportive and honest with her. He deserved the same honesty in return. "Actually, no. My mother is in the hospital. They're running tests to determine if she needs heart surgery. I'm trying to manage her care while keeping up with work responsibilities, and the medical bills are going to be significant." "I'm so sorry," Adrian said, genuine concern in his voice. "How can I help?" "You've already helped," Clara said. "This job, the health insurance, I couldn't even afford to have her hospitalized without the coverage. I'm managing." "But barely," Adrian observed gently. "Clara, let me help with the medical bills. Consider it an advance on your salary or a loan if that makes it feel less like charity." "I can't accept that," Clara protested. "You've already done so much for me." "Why not?" Adrian challenged. "I have resources that could ease your stress significantly without affecting my own financial stability. You're dealing with a family emergency while trying to do excellent work for my company. Letting me help isn't weakness. It's accepting support from someone who cares about your well-being." "Someone who cares," Clara repeated, hearing something beneath the words. Adrian met her eyes directly. "Yes, someone who cares. Clara, we've been pretending this is purely professional, but I think we both know it's become more than that. I value you as an employee, yes, but I also value you as a person I've come to care about deeply. Letting me help your mother isn't charity. It's what people do for each other when they care." Clara felt tears threaten. "Adrian, I don't want you to think I'm interested in you because of your money. That would make me exactly like those women you described who only cared about your wealth." "I don't think that," Adrian assured her. "You've never asked for anything. You work incredibly hard. You're constantly giving rather than taking. Clara, if I thought you were pursuing me for financial gain, I wouldn't have developed feelings for you. But I see who you are, your character, your compassion, your strength. Those are what drew me to you, not any expectation of reciprocal interest." "I do have reciprocal interest," Clara admitted quietly. "I've been trying to ignore it because of our professional relationship, because of our different backgrounds, because it seemed impossible. But Adrian, I care about you too, as more than just my boss." The admission hung between them, transformative in its honesty. Adrian reached across the table, taking Clara's hand gently. "Then let me help with your mother's medical bills. Not as your employer, not as some wealthy benefactor, but as someone who cares about you and wants to ease your burden. Please." Clara nodded, unable to speak past the emotion in her throat. "Okay, thank you." Adrian arranged for his company's HR department to handle the medical billing directly, categorizing it as an employee assistance program benefit rather than a personal gift. Clara's mother underwent successful heart surgery 2 weeks later, and the recovery care that should have bankrupted Clara was covered through Adrian's intervention. "I can't ever repay you for this," Clara told Adrian when her mother was finally home and recovering well. "I don't want repayment," Adrian said. "I want you to be able to focus on your work and your family without crushing financial stress. That's worth far more to me than the money I spent on medical bills. Their relationship shifted after that, moving from professional with undercurrents to openly romantic. They still maintained boundaries at work, no public displays of affection, continued professional conduct during business hours. But outside the diner, they began dating properly. Dinners at restaurants where Adrian could relax without being recognized, walks through parks where they could talk for hours, quiet evenings at Clara's apartment where Adrian got to know her mother and younger brother. Tommy, Clara's 16-year-old brother, was particularly fascinated by Adrian. "So, you're actually a millionaire?" Tommy asked with teenage directness during their first meeting. "Like, you have millions of dollars?" "I do," Adrian confirmed, clearly amused rather than offended by the blunt question. "And you're dating my sister because?" "Because she's the kindest, strongest, most genuine person I've ever met," Adrian said simply. "Because she treated me with dignity when she thought I was homeless. Because she works harder than anyone I know. Because being with her makes me want to be a better person." Tommy studied Adrian for a long moment, then apparently decided he passed some internal test. "Okay, you can date my sister, but if you hurt her, millionaire or not, I'll find a way to make your life miserable." "That's fair," Adrian agreed seriously. "I promise I'll do everything I can to never hurt her." Clara's mother, Isabella, was equally protective but slightly more subtle in her assessment. Over tea one afternoon while Clara was at work, Isabella asked Adrian directly, "Why my daughter? You could date anyone, models, heiresses, women who already understand your world. Why choose someone from our background?" "Because those women see my money first and me second," Adrian explained. "Clara saw a hungry person and fed them without knowing anything about my wealth or status. That revealed her character in ways nothing else could. Mrs. Martinez, I've spent years being pursued by people who wanted what I could provide. Your daughter wanted nothing from me except the chance to show basic human kindness. That's irreplaceable." Isabella softened slightly. "She's had a hard few years. Her father died when she was 22. Then she had to drop out of college to support Tommy and me. She deserves happiness, Adrian. Can you give her that?" "I'll certainly try," Adrian said. "And Mrs. Martinez, I promise I see who Clara truly is. Not a project to fix or someone to rescue. Just an extraordinary woman who I'm grateful chose to let me into her life." 6 months after the day Clara had been fired for feeding a homeless man, Adrian invited her to dinner at an upscale restaurant, one he didn't own, so they could just be a couple enjoying a meal rather than business owner and employee. Clara wore a dress Adrian had insisted on buying for her, elegant but comfortable, making her feel beautiful in ways she'd forgotten were possible. During dessert, Adrian seemed nervous in a way Clara had never witnessed. He kept fidgeting with his napkin, starting to speak, then stopping himself. Finally, he took a deep breath and reached across the table for her hand. "Clara, 6 months ago I walked into Willow's diner disguised as a homeless man. I was cynical about people, convinced that genuine kindness was extinct, that everyone had ulterior motives. Then you proved me completely wrong. You fed me when I was hungry. You treated me with dignity when everyone else looked away. You showed me that extraordinary compassion still exists in the world." "Adrian." "What? Let me finish," he said gently. "You've transformed not just that diner but my entire approach to business, to philanthropy, to life. The community meals program you built serves over 200 people daily now. You've inspired me to implement similar programs at all my properties, but more than that, you've transformed me personally. You've shown me what matters, not wealth or status, but character and compassion and choosing kindness, even when it costs you." Adrian stood, and Clara realized with shock that he was moving to kneel beside her chair. "Clara Martinez, I fell in love with you the moment you chose to feed someone you believed was homeless. Everything since has just confirmed what I knew then. You're the most extraordinary person I've ever met. Will you marry me?" He produced a ring, beautiful but not ostentatiously expensive, clearly chosen with thought rather than just price, and Clara felt tears streaming down her face. "Yes," she said, laughing through the emotion. "Yes, absolutely yes." The restaurant erupted in applause from other diners who'd clearly noticed the proposal. Adrian slid the ring onto Clara's finger and kissed her, tender and full of promise. As they left the restaurant that evening, Clara thought about the journey from that awful day when Brooks had fired her to this perfect moment of engagement to a man she loved deeply. 6 months ago, she'd been humiliated, unemployed, certain her kindness had cost her everything important. Now, she had meaningful work, financial stability for her family, and a partner who saw and valued her for who she truly was. "What are you thinking?" Adrian asked as they walked toward his car. "I'm thinking that getting fired was the best thing that ever happened to me," Clara admitted. "If Brooks hadn't been so cruel, if you hadn't been there to witness it, if I hadn't chosen to feed you despite his orders, none of this would have happened. I'd still be serving tables, struggling to make rent, never knowing that life could be this good. I'm glad I was there," Adrian said. "Glad you chose kindness. Glad that horrible moment led to all of this." He gestured between them, encompassing everything their relationship had become. They married 3 months later, in a ceremony that perfectly reflected their values and story. Instead of an expensive venue, they held it at Willow's Diner, renovated and decorated beautifully, but still the place where everything had begun. Instead of extravagant catering, the meal was served community style, with guests sitting together at long tables and serving themselves family style, just like the community meals program operated. But most meaningfully, half the guests were people who'd been served by the community meals program, people experiencing homelessness who Clara had come to know personally, elderly folks on fixed incomes who'd found community at the diner, families struggling financially who'd discovered reliable access to food through Clara's outreach work. Everyone who shaped our story should be here to celebrate it. Clara had insisted when planning the guest list, not just your wealthy friends and business associates, the people who remind us why this work matters. Adrian had agreed immediately, and the resulting celebration was unlike any wedding either had attended. Wealthy business owners sat next to homeless veterans. Heiresses chatted with single mothers working multiple jobs. The barrier between Adrian's privileged world and Clara's working-class background dissolved in shared joy and celebration. In his vows, Adrian said, "Clara, you taught me that wealth is meaningless unless it serves humanity. That success should be measured not in dollars accumulated, but in lives improved. That the most important thing any of us can do is see each other's humanity and respond with compassion. I promise to spend the rest of my life living those values you demonstrated when you fed a stranger you thought was homeless. I promise to use my resources to create opportunity and dignity for others. And I promise to never forget that the most valuable thing I have isn't money, it's you." Clara's vows were equally moving. "Adrian, you saw me when I felt invisible. You defended me when I was powerless. You turned my worst professional moment into the beginning of my best life. But more than that, you've shown me that wealth doesn't have to corrupt, that power can be used to protect rather than dominate, that success and compassion aren't mutually exclusive. I promise to keep reminding you what matters, to build meaningful programs that help real people, and to love you not for what you can provide, but for who you are, a man whose heart is as generous as his bank account." After the ceremony, as guests enjoyed the community-style reception, Clara's mother pulled her aside. "Your father would be so proud," Isabella said, tears in her eyes. "Not because you married someone wealthy, he wouldn't have cared about that, but because you married someone who sees your value, who honors your compassion, who builds their life around the same values we raised you with." "I wish Dad could have met him," Clara said. "He knows," Isabella assured her. "Wherever he is, he knows you're happy and loved and doing work that matters. That's all we ever wanted for you." 5 years after the wedding, Clara stood in the newly opened Martinez Cole Community Center, a facility funded entirely by Adrian but designed and run by Clara, offering not just food but job training, educational programs, healthcare services, and community support for people experiencing poverty or homelessness. The center's name had been Clara's idea, not just your name. She'd insisted when Adrian had suggested calling it the Cole Community Center. "This work is a partnership, my lived experience and your resources. Both matter equally." The grand opening drew hundreds of people, community members, who'd benefit from the center's services. business leaders interested in replicating the model, government officials recognizing the public-private partnership. But the speech that moved Clara most came from a man named Robert, who'd been homeless when the community meals program first launched at Willow's Diner 5 years ago. "I was invisible for 3 years," Robert told the assembled crowd, "living on streets where people looked through me like I didn't exist. Then I walked into Willow's Diner one day, and Clara treated me like a person, not a problem to solve, not a charity case, just a human being deserving of dignity. That simple act of being seen, really seen, gave me courage to accept other help, to get into transitional housing, to find job training, to rebuild my life." He paused, emotion clear in his voice. "I have an apartment now, a job I'm good at, reconnection with family I thought I'd lost forever. And it started because one person chose kindness when everyone else chose to look away. This center will change hundreds of lives the way Clara changed mine. Because when people feel seen and valued, they remember they're worth saving." After the speeches, as the celebration continued, Adrian pulled Clara into a quiet corner. "We did it," he said. "Created something that actually matters, that helps real people, and that models what compassion and resources can accomplish together." "We did," Clara agreed. "And it started because I fed you when you were hungry, and you saw value in that kindness. Everything good in my life traces back to that moment." "Everything good in mine too," Adrian said. "I found purpose and partnership and love, all because I chose to visit that diner in disguise, and you chose to feed me despite consequences." They stood together watching people tour the community center, families discovering resources they desperately needed, individuals finding pathways out of poverty, community members accessing services that would transform their lives. The center would serve thousands, would become a model replicated in other cities, would demonstrate that businesses could prioritize community welfare alongside profits. But for Clara and Adrian, the most meaningful part wasn't the scale or recognition. It was knowing that their relationship, built on genuine seeing and mutual respect, had created something that helped people who society often overlooked, that their story proved compassion and success could coexist. That one act of kindness, defended by one person with resources, could ripple outward, transforming entire communities. 10 years after Clara had been fired for feeding a homeless man, she and Adrian returned to Willow's Diner for a quiet anniversary dinner. The diner looked completely different now, expanded, renovated, a thriving hub that served both paying customers and community members experiencing food insecurity. "Do you ever regret it?" Adrian asked as they sat at the booth where he'd first sat disguised as homeless. "Losing your job that day? Being humiliated in front of everyone?" "Not even for a second," Clara said honestly. "That moment revealed who Brooks truly was, cruel and petty. But it also revealed who you are, someone who uses power to defend rather than dominate. Everything I have now, everything we've built together, exists because I chose kindness that day, and you chose to defend that choice." "Best decision I ever made," Adrian said. "Coming to this diner in disguise, witnessing your compassion, falling in love with the woman who fed a stranger when everyone else looked away." They raised their glasses, toasting to 10 years of marriage, to meaningful work that helped thousands, to a partnership built on shared values rather than wealth or status. The waitress who'd been fired for showing compassion and the millionaire who'd defended her together, they'd proved that kindness always comes back around, that standing firm in your values, even when it costs, you can lead to rewards beyond anything you imagined, that sometimes losing everything you thought mattered opens doors to discovering what actually does. And it had all started with one plate of soup, served with dignity to a man everyone else had dismissed as worthless. That simple act of seeing someone's humanity had transformed 2 lives and eventually thousands more, proving that sometimes the smallest acts of compassion create the biggest ripples of change. 15 years after Clara had been fired for feeding a homeless man, she sat in her office at the Martinez Cole Foundation, the organization she and Adrian had built to expand their community outreach work beyond just food insecurity, to address housing, healthcare, job training, and educational support for people experiencing poverty. The foundation now operated in 12 cities across the Pacific Northwest, had served over 1 million meals through community dining programs, and had helped thousands of people transition from homelessness to stable housing and employment. But what made Clara proudest wasn't the scale, it was the stories of individual lives transformed by someone seeing their humanity and offering support with dignity. Today, Clara was reviewing applications for the Foundation's newest initiative, a restaurant training program that would teach culinary skills to people experiencing homelessness or recovering from addiction, providing both job skills and guaranteed employment at Cole Hospitality Group restaurants upon completion. Her assistant knocked on her office door. "Mrs. Cole, there's someone here to see you. He says he knew you from Willow's Diner years ago." Clara looked up, curious. She met former diner patrons, occasionally people who remembered her kindness during her waitressing days and wanted to thank her or support the Foundation's work. "Send him in," she said. The man who entered looked to be in his early 40s, well-dressed and confident, but with the kind of weathered face that suggested he'd lived through difficult times. It took Clara a moment to place him, then recognition hit. "Robert?" she asked, standing. "Robert Miller?" "You remember me," Robert said, smiling widely. "I wasn't sure you would. It's been years." "Of course I remember you," Clara said, coming around her desk to hug him. "You spoke at the community center opening 10 years ago. You told your story about being homeless, about how being treated with dignity at Willow's Diner gave you the courage to accept other help. Robert, how are you? What have you been doing?" "That's why I'm here," Robert said. "I wanted you to know what happened after I got my life back together. I wanted you to see the ripple effect of your kindness." Over the next hour, Robert shared his journey. After getting into transitional housing and job training through programs the Foundation connected him with, he'd found work as a maintenance technician. He'd saved money, reconnected with his estranged daughter, eventually purchased a small home. Then he'd started volunteering at homeless shelters, wanting to pay forward the compassion he'd received. 2 years ago, Robert continued, I decided I wanted to do more. I used my savings to start a small non-profit, nothing fancy that provides basic necessities to people experiencing homelessness. Warm clothes, toiletries, sleeping bags, the things that make survival a little less brutal. He pulled out his phone, showing Clara photos of volunteers distributing supplies, of grateful recipients bundled in donated coats, of a small warehouse packed with donations. "We served over 5,000 people last year," Robert said with obvious pride. "And Clara, every single person who comes to us gets treated with respect. We don't make them prove they're deserving. We don't judge their choices or circumstances. We just see them as humans who need help, and we provide it with dignity." Clara felt tears forming. "Robert, that's extraordinary. You've created exactly the kind of organization the world needs." "I learned from the best," Robert said. 15 years ago, you treated me like a person when everyone else saw trash to be removed. That simple act of recognition changed the trajectory of my entire life. Now I'm trying to do the same for others. And Clara, I'm not the only one. Do you know how many people who were served by your programs have gone on to create their own community initiatives?" He pulled out a folder, showing Clara documentation of dozens of organizations started by people who'd received help through Martinez Cole Foundation programs, former homeless individuals running job training non-profits, people who'd been food insecure creating community gardens, families who'd received support, now volunteering to help others in similar circumstances. "This is what you and Mr. Cole built," Robert said. "Not just programs that help people, but a culture of compassion that spreads. People who were shown dignity when they had nothing now showing that same dignity to others. The ripple effect is incalculable." End quote. After Robert left, Clara sat alone in her office for a long time, processing what he'd shared. She'd known intellectually that the Foundation's work mattered, had seen the statistics and success rates, but hearing concrete stories of people taking the compassion they'd received and multiplying it outward that hit differently. She called Adrian, who was currently at one of their restaurants across town. "Can you come to my office?" she asked. "There's something I need to share with you." When Adrian arrived 30 minutes later, Clara told him about Robert's visit, about the ripple effects their work had created. "We thought we were just feeding people and providing services," she said, "but we've actually created a movement. People who experienced dignity during their worst moments are now ensuring others receive that same dignity. We've modeled what compassion looks like, and it's spreading." Adrian pulled Clara into his arms. "That's because you understood from the beginning that dignity matters as much as material support. You never treated people experiencing homelessness as charity cases to be pitied. You treated them as whole humans deserving respect. That approach is what makes our work transformative rather than just transactional." "We did this together," Clara insisted. "Your resources and my lived understanding, both were necessary." "Both were necessary," Adrian agreed. "But Clara, the heart of all of this, the thing that makes it actually work, that came from you, from who you've always been. The woman who fed a homeless man even when it cost her job. The woman who believed everyone deserves kindness. That's the foundation everything else is built on." That evening, Clara and Adrian hosted a dinner at their home, a modest but comfortable house they'd deliberately chosen over the mansion Adrian could easily afford. Their guests were an eclectic mix: Robert and several other people whose lives had been transformed by foundation programs, longtime employees from Willow's Diner and other Cole hospitality properties, Clara's mother, Isabella, now healthy and active in her 70s, Clara's brother Tommy, now a successful accountant with his own family, and various friends and colleagues who'd been part of their journey. If you've ever wondered whether one act of kindness can truly create lasting change, whether standing firm in your values leads to meaningful impact, drop a comment and subscribe. This story proves that compassion multiplies when we choose to see each other's humanity, that the people we help often become the helpers of others, that building a culture of dignity creates ripples, extending far beyond what we can see. During dinner, Adrian asked everyone to share their favorite memory from the past 15 years of the Foundation's work. The stories that emerged were remarkable people, describing the exact moment they felt seen as human rather than as a problem. Two employees talking about how working for a company with genuine values changed their understanding of business. Community members explaining how access to food or housing or job training had transformed their family's trajectory. When it was Clara's turn, she said, "My favorite memory is from 15 years ago, before the Foundation even existed. I was at my lowest point, fired, humiliated, convinced my kindness had cost me everything. Then Adrian showed up at my apartment and offered me not just my job back, but a role that honored exactly the values that got me fired. That moment taught me that doing the right thing, even when it costs you, eventually leads somewhere better. Every success we've had since traces back to that lesson." "I have not mo—" Isabella raised her glass. "I'd like to make a toast to my daughter, who never stopped believing that kindness matters even when the world punished her for it. And to Adrian, who saw her character and built a partnership that's helped thousands. But mostly, to all of you people who've taken compassion you received and multiplied it outward. You've proven that dignity isn't charity, it's the foundation of genuine community." Hell. As glasses clinked and conversation flowed, Clara looked around the table at this extraordinary collection of people whose lives had intersected through compassion and mutual support. 15 years ago, she'd been a struggling waitress working double shifts to support her family. Today, she ran a multi-million-dollar foundation, had helped transform thousands of lives, and had built a marriage based on shared values and genuine partnership. The transformation still seemed surreal sometimes, but it was real, built on the foundation of one act of kindness that had cost her job but revealed her character to someone with resources to amplify it. Later that evening, after guests had left and Clara and Adrian were cleaning up together a nightly ritual they'd maintained, despite having staff who could do it for them, Adrian said, "I've been thinking about succession planning for the foundation, and a tenure, and a no then." "We're not that old," Clara protested, though she knew the conversation was necessary. "Not about stepping down," Adrian clarified, "but about ensuring the foundation continues with the same values after we're gone. The programs can be replicated, we have manuals and training materials for everything, but the heart of it, the understanding that dignity matters as much as services, that's harder to institutionalize. "What are you thinking?" Clara asked. "I think we need to create a board primarily composed of people who've been served by our programs," Adrian said, "not as token representation, but as actual governance. Robert, for instance, or some of the other folks who were here tonight. People who understand from lived experience what it means to be seen as less than, and who are committed to ensuring no one else experiences that dehumanization." Clara felt something click into place. That's brilliant. Not a board of wealthy donors or business leaders making decisions for people they've never met, but people with actual experience guiding the work. "Exactly," Adrian confirmed. "We can have advisors with financial and legal expertise, but the core decision-making should rest with people who know what it's like to need help, who understand the difference between services provided with dignity versus services that feel demeaning." Over the following year, they restructured the foundation's governance exactly as Adrian had proposed. The new board included Robert and 6 other people who'd been homeless, food insecure, unemployed, at rock bottom in various ways, who'd received support from foundation programs and rebuilt their lives. These board members brought perspectives that traditional non-profit governance typically lacked, pushing the foundation to constantly center dignity and genuine respect in all its work. "This is revolutionary," one foundation consultant told Clara during a meeting. "Most non-profits talk about centering the people they serve. You've actually done it by putting them in governance roles." "It should be standard practice," Clara said. "Why would we make decisions about serving people without including them in those decisions? Their expertise is invaluable." 20 years after the day Clara had been fired for feeding a homeless man, she and Adrian were invited to speak at a national conference on food insecurity and community support. Their keynote address drew over 2,000 attendees, non-profit leaders, government officials, business owners, advocates, all interested in learning from the Martinez Cole Foundation model. Clara spoke first, sharing her story from the beginning. The struggling waitress working double shifts. The day a disheveled man came into Willow's diner. Her choice to feed him despite her manager's orders. The humiliation of being publicly fired. Then Adrian's revelation of who he was and his offer of meaningful work. "I didn't feed that homeless man expecting reward," Clara said. "I did it because it was right, because everyone deserves to eat, regardless of their circumstances, because I believed kindness matters even when no one important is watching. What I didn't know was that someone important was watching, not my boss, who fired me for compassion, but the owner who would defend that compassion and help me build something meaningful from it." She paused, looking at Adrian, who sat in the front row. "But here's what I've learned over 20 years. The most important person watching was me. I was testing my own values, discovering whether I'd maintain my principles when they cost me personally. And I'm grateful I passed that test, because it revealed who I truly was, not just to Adrian, but to myself." When Adrian took the stage, he shared his perspective. 20 years ago, I was wealthy but cynical. I'd built a successful business, accumulated significant wealth, but felt empty because I couldn't trust whether people liked me or my money. So I started visiting my businesses in disguise, trying to see their true character when no one knew the owner was present. "What I learned wasn't what I expected," Adrian continued. "I thought I'd expose bad employees, discover who was lazy when unsupervised. Instead, I discovered something far more valuable. I found Clara, someone whose character was so strong, whose compassion was so genuine, that she'd sacrifice her own well-being to help a stranger. That discovery changed everything for me." He described building the foundation with Clara, how her understanding of dignity transformed their approach to community support. "We don't just provide services," Adrian explained. "We provide services in ways that honor people's humanity. That seems simple, but it's revolutionary. Most charity treats recipients as problems to solve. We treat them as valuable community members experiencing temporary difficulty. That shift in perspective makes all the difference." The keynote received a standing ovation, but what moved Clara most came during the Q&A session afterward, when a young woman stood and said, "Miss Cole, I received meals from your foundation's program 5 years ago when I was homeless. The way I was treated there with respect, like a person rather than a charity case, gave me the courage to believe I deserved better. I'm now in college, studying social work, and I want to create programs like yours. Thank you for seeing people like me as worth saving." After the conference, as Clara and Adrian flew home, Clara reflected on the journey from fired waitress to respected foundation director, from struggling to support her family to helping thousands of other families find stability. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if I hadn't fed you that day?" she asked Adrian. "If I'd just followed Mr. Brooks's orders and kicked you out?" "All the time," Adrian admitted. "I probably would have fired Brooks eventually. Enough complaints would have reached me, but I wouldn't have met you. Wouldn't have learned about dignity from someone who embodied it. Wouldn't have built the foundation or changed how my businesses operate. So much good came from your one act of kindness. Our lives would be completely different," Clara said. "Worse," Adrian said firmly. "My life would definitely be worse without you, and thousands of other lives would be worse without the foundation's work. Clara, you feeding a homeless man wasn't just kindness. It was the seed of a movement that's helped countless people and inspired dozens of similar initiatives. That one plate of soup had incalculable impact." 25 years after being fired for feeding a homeless man, Clara stood in Willow's Diner, now a historical landmark and museum, documenting the origin of the Martinez Cole Foundation. The booth where Adrian had sat in disguise was preserved exactly as it had been that day, with a plaque explaining what had happened there. The museum displayed photos chronicling the foundation's growth, testimonials from people whose lives had been transformed, documentation of the dozens of community initiatives inspired by their model. School groups toured regularly, learning about compassion and social responsibility. Visitors left feeling inspired to make their own communities better. Clara was there for the 25th anniversary celebration, a gathering of hundreds of people whose lives had intersected with the foundation over the years. Robert was there, now running a thriving non-profit that had expanded to 3 cities. Diane, the former server who'd asked about Clara's return that first day after Brooks was fired, was there. She'd eventually become general manager of Willow's Diner and had just retired after 20 years of excellent service. But the guest who moved Clara most was a young woman named Jennifer, who approached her shyly. "Miss Cole, I wanted to thank you for saving my family. 10 years ago, my dad lost his job and we were about to become homeless. Your foundation's emergency assistance program helped us keep our apartment while Dad found new work. That support kept our family together during the worst time of our lives." Jennifer paused, emotion clear in her voice. "But what mattered even more than the money was how we were treated. The foundation staff never made us feel like failures or like we'd done something wrong to end up needing help. They treated us with dignity, made us feel like temporary hardship didn't define our worth. That experience shaped how I see the world, how I treat others. I'm studying non-profit management in college now," Jennifer continued, "and I want to run programs like yours. Programs that center dignity and respect, that recognize people experiencing hardship as valuable humans deserving support. You created a model I want to replicate in my own community." Listening to Jennifer, Clara realized the full scope of what she and Adrian had built. Not just programs serving thousands directly, but a philosophy spreading to thousands more. People who'd experienced dignity-centered support were now creating similar programs in their own communities, multiplying the impact far beyond what Martinez Cole Foundation could achieve alone. That evening, Clara and Adrian sat together in the preserved booth where everything had begun, the booth where a disguised millionaire had sat hungry and a compassionate waitress had chosen kindness over job security. The diner was empty now, just the two of them in this sacred space where their story started. 25 years, Adrian said, shaking his head. A quarter century since I walked in here pretending to be homeless. Clara, if someone had told me that day that the woman who fed me would become my wife, my partner in transforming how businesses serve communities, the love of my life, I wouldn't have believed them. If someone had told me the homeless man I fed was actually a millionaire who'd helped me build a foundation serving millions, I definitely wouldn't have believed them, Clara added. I thought I was just doing the right thing. I had no idea that moment would change my entire life. That's the thing about genuine kindness, Adrian observed. You do it without expecting reward. The reward comes anyway, but it's not why you acted. Clara, you fed me because it was right, not because you thought it would benefit you. That authenticity is what made everything else possible. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, both reflecting on the extraordinary journey from that first encounter to this moment. The foundation they'd built served over 3 million meals annually across 12 cities. Their restaurant training program had helped over 2,000 people transition from homelessness to stable employment. The ripple effect of people who'd been helped going on to help others was incalculable but clearly massive. "Do you have any regrets?" Clara asked. "About how we've spent the past 25 years? The resources you've invested in the foundation could have made you even wealthier if you'd focused purely on business expansion." "Not a single regret," Adrian said firmly. "I'm wealthy enough. The foundation work gave my wealth meaning and purpose beyond just accumulation. Clara, the best investment I ever made was defending you when Brooks fired you, hiring you for meaningful work, building this life with you. That investment paid returns no business venture ever could. The best thing that ever happened to me was getting fired for doing the right thing," Clara said, "because it revealed who Mr. Brooks truly was, who you truly were, and who I truly was. That moment tested everyone's character, and the results shaped everything that came after." As they prepared to leave Willow's Diner for the final time that evening, Clara paused at the door, looking back at the booth where a single act of compassion had changed countless lives. That booth represented something profound, the truth that how we treat people with no power, no money, no ability to benefit us, reveals our genuine character. That standing firm in our values, even when it costs us personally, eventually leads somewhere meaningful. That kindness really does come back around, often in ways we couldn't possibly anticipate. A waitress had fed a homeless man despite being ordered to throw him out. She'd lost her job but kept her integrity, and that integrity had attracted someone with resources to defend and amplify it. Together, they'd built something that helped millions, inspired thousands more to create their own compassionate initiatives, and proved that businesses could prioritize both profit and human dignity. She was fired for showing compassion. Visitors would read on the museum plaque as they toured Willow's Diner in years to come. But that act of kindness revealed her character to someone who recognized its value. Together, they built a movement, proving that seeing people's humanity, really seeing it, not just acknowledging it, intellectually creates ripples of transformation, extending far beyond what we can measure. The story of Clara and Adrian would be told and retold in the museum, at conferences, in non-profit management courses, by people whose lives had been touched by foundation programs. But the core lesson remains simple and powerful. Choose kindness even when it costs you, because genuine compassion creates ripples extending far beyond what you can see. Stand firm in your values, even when others punish you for them, because eventually the right person will witness your integrity and help amplify it. And most importantly, how you treat people when you have nothing to gain from treating them well reveals who you truly are. That authenticity, that genuine seeing of others' humanity, that's what changes the world, one act of compassion at a time, multiplied by everyone who witnesses it and chooses to embody the same values. 25 years after being fired for feeding a homeless man, Clara knew with certainty that getting fired had been the best thing that ever happened to her. Not because losing a job was good, but because it revealed character, hers, Adrian's, Mr. Brooks's, in ways that transformed everything. That revelation, that moment of truth, had become the foundation for a life of meaning, impact, and love she'd never imagined possible. And it had all started with one plate of soup, served with dignity to someone everyone else had dismissed. That simple act of seeing another person's humanity had created ripples still spreading 25 years later, touching lives in ways Clara would never fully know but could trust were making the world a little bit kinder, a little bit more just, a little bit more human.